Right, okay. I'll just wait till bang on 10 o'clock.
Yeah.
Right, okay, ready to go?
We are, Chair.
Right, thanks, Debs. Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to this meeting of the Resources Committee, which is, as usual, being held by MS Teams and live recorded. If by any chance I drop off the call, Caroline Stewart will step in and chair until I'm reconnected. So I'd like to welcome everybody to this meeting, including colleagues from Scottish Government and HMICS. DCC Jane Connors will be joining us for item 3.1, which is the financial monitoring and planning. And then later on the agenda, 6.1, when we're talking about the 2024-25 draft budget, so that she's able to provide an operational perspective to our discussions. ACC Wendy Middleton will be with us throughout, so delighted to have you all with us. I don't think we've any apologies.
No apologies, Chair.
Thank you. Are there any declarations of interest and connections to be recorded? No? Good. And can I ask you for approval to take decisions for items 5 to 9 on the agenda in private for the reasons recorded? Thank you very much. So moving straight on swiftly to section 2, the minute and actions from the meeting on the 20th of February, which isn't actually that long ago. It's remarkable how quickly these come round. First of all, can I ask for members to approve the minutes as an accurate record? Okay, thank you very much. We've got a few items on the action plan, all the 3 items, all of which are not yet due, but will be coming to our meeting on the 19th of June. Are you content with that? Okay, thank you. And there, I'm happy to just note that under item 2.3, there's been no formal committee business transacted between the committee meetings, just for the record. So moving on to section 3, financial monitoring and planning. Item 3.1 is our period 10 financial monitoring report, and we welcome Lynn Brown to the meeting to take us through this report, I mean. Welcome, Lynn. You can, of course, as usual, take it that we've studied the paper, but would you like to highlight anything that you think we should be focusing in on just now?
Thank you, Chair. Morning, everyone. So, yeah, this report presents the period 10 financial position. So it reflects the fact that at Q3 we were reporting a £5 million forecast overspend for the year. This compared to the £19 million forecast at Q1. So really reflecting significant movement across the financial year in terms of the financial position, and reflecting the significant effort across the organisation that's been undertaken to reduce spend in year. So the period end report does show an improved position on a year-to-date basis against the Q3 forecast. So the P10 report is showing a 1.7 million underspend against the forecast. We've also had the results of period 11, and this confirms that we are still ahead of that Q3 forecast. So again, reflective of the effort in terms of reducing spend, overtime, delaying non-pay, etc. A huge amount of effort from everyone to bring that spend down. So really the key thing here is that any real underspends, as opposed to timing variances, will reduce the overall outcome for the organisation for the year and the reliance on the contingency funding. So members are aware we've requested £5 million contingency funding from Scottish Government in terms of a potential overspend of up to 5 million. So not that was a target to overspend, it was contingency if further savings didn't materialise. So the deliverability of the budget is still shown as red in the period 10 report. That will be reviewed as part of the period 11 report as we're moving towards year end, given that there's a few weeks left in the financial year, and that would reflect any decisions or actions around the outcome of the contingency funding, etc. So in terms of capital, we've spent just over 90% of our funding allocation by the end of period 10, but we're forecasting to come in budget. In terms of, we've still got a little bit of slippage to manage throughout towards the end of the financial year, but we are looking at that daily. We've reinstated our daily monitoring, our daily forecast, and our daily discussions with the business areas. So capital, along with reform, is being closely monitored, albeit with a different focus as to last year. But we really are homing in and focusing that spend towards the funding allocation. So there's no issues with that area at the moment. So, and then just in terms of reform, again, we are forecasting break even on reform. There is a bit of a year-to-date underspend there in terms of the period 10 position. But as I said, that has been monitored daily by finance and the business areas in terms of bringing the overall position in line with the funding allocation for the year. So happy to stop there and take any questions.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lynn. And once again, thank you for your very clear explanation, both just now and in the paper and the slides. Could I just ask two things? One is, we've already got something like 2.5 weeks to go, and you've touched on the daily monitoring. Is anything new coming out from the daily monitoring, that, bearing in mind that we've got a very short time window to go?
No, the daily monitoring, there is some movements as you would expect and that we would be looking for, because we did have that slippage element to deliver, but there's nothing significant or anything that's causing any concern coming out of that monitoring. We're still in line for the overall funding position for capital. Okay,
thank you. And finally from me, the request that went into Scottish Government for the up to 5 million, have we had any formal response to that? Oh, I see James has got his hand up to answer that.
Yeah,
James.
Thanks, Chair. We haven't had a formal response. There's been ongoing informal dialogue around it. Certainly there is an accountable officer template that is being sent to the Permanent Secretary to get the green light for that contingency funding. I think given where we are at period 10, that as Lynn says, we're ahead of the budget on the Q3 position, and the period 11 numbers are just being finalised, and again we're continuing to see a trend under what was in the forecast that I would say, I wouldn't want to say at the moment definitively where we will get to, but I'm pretty confident in saying we will not need a full 5 million, and I suppose the government is probably waiting to understand exactly what it is that we need in order to finalise that letter. I suppose if it's required at all. Now, I'm not saying that we won't need anything, but we are continuing to push down on non-pay spend and on overtime management, and things are moving in the right direction. So if we do need the contingency, then I think it will probably come right up at the year end when we've got the final position. So I think that's my understanding of why it hasn't been signed off yet, because we're moving ahead of what we had thought where we might have been when we did the forecast just at the start of January. So I think from my perspective, I'm comfortable with where we're at, that we haven't had the formal sign off, in a combination of what we're actually delivering month on month, and that ongoing informal dialogue that if we need that support, then it should get finalised.
Right, thanks, James. I asked the question partly because whatever the outturn actually looks like, and explaining it against the budget, we'll have to have some form of words that makes it clear that if there was an overspend, albeit hopefully under 5 million, that we've got a sort of narrative that explains that it didn't just pop up, it was anticipated and an approval obtained in advance. Okay, over to other members of the committee for questions. Caroline.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Lynn, as always, for a very clear report. And I have to say, just sort of well done to all of you for getting on top of this and looking towards bringing it in around that 5 or under if possible. My question really is around it's more really for the year ahead than this year. When I look at your slide deck, page 5, and is it page 5? Yes, it is. No, it's not. Sorry, it's not. It's the next one. Oh, no, I've lost the slide. I was really looking in police staff costs, not police officers. And when you look at this, it was really, the damage was done in our budgetary year by the hiring of those extra, I think it was around 200 people in that first quarter, really. And that's been the sort of hump that we've been trying to sort of kick back on for the rest of the year, along with overtime. And I just wonder, but because these people are now, they were, you know, obviously full-time hires, how are we going to rebalance the business? Because we sort of over-recruited into that space by 200. They're still here. How's that shaping up for next year in terms of budgetary management, bringing that balance back into the business? Thanks.
Lynn, do you want to answer this just now, or are we going to cover that in the budget paper later on?
I can let, if James wants to come in first, then I can add anything to that. We can touch on it.
Yeah, thanks, thanks, Chair. I think the analysis is right that we continued to recruit from April through into the summer until the recruitment pause came in, and that is what meant that we were on course to therefore kind of exceed the pay budget for staff in the financial year, which is still the position that we find ourselves in. What I would say is that has been brought back to an extent through the vacancy freeze. We that and the work that has been done with regards to the VER exercise that will be we'll touch upon that when we get into the budget report, is a component part of what we're going to be presenting as a balanced budget position. So I think if we're able to deliver against the plans going into next year, and then we will be on course to deliver a balanced budget next year and not get into the situation that we found ourselves in this year. There's also a little bit of finalisation going on around when does the recruitment pause get lifted. That's not necessarily going to happen in April. Right. That could be later in the year, but there's quite a number of factors for consideration in the budget, and Lynn will touch upon those when we get to the budget report in the private session. But there are a number of moving components. But overall, from looking at it from a risk perspective, I think that the budget that we have for next year, from a financial perspective, not speaking from an operational perspective, but from a financial perspective, is of far lower delivery risk than the one that we've had in the current year. And we will touch upon that when we get into private session.
Great, thanks, James. That's perfect to hear. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Tom, you're next.
Okay, thank you. Just like Caroline, just want to acknowledge the significant work that's come to fruition to get back to this budgetary position from where it was. I've no doubt the organisational pain that was felt in that work was acute, and that'll be very sharp in the thinking going into next year for a balanced budget. But the work that's been done there, I just my appreciation to everyone involved in it, particularly the financial team that's on the call. My question's around the revenue report. It's slide, I don't know if it's slide 6 or page 6, but it's on it, and it's the revenue non-pay variance. It's income variance I want to talk about by type, and it shows against the full year budget and variance for mutual aid, where income is 50% less. That's £800,000. So I'd like to understand the position of what was the budget set at. Did we not have as much activity and if I didn't get the income coming in, or is that a debt that's owed, etc.? Just some explanation, because a 50% variance is significant. Thank you.
Okay, Lynn, are you able to answer that?
Yeah. So the the main item that was in that budget line for mutual aid was the Cycle World Championships. So obviously the budget was set at this time last year, you know, before the plans were fully developed. So it's really, that's there'll be other bits and pieces in there, but by far that was the main event in there, and the parameters changed through the planning, so there wasn't as much mutual aid required as was first anticipated. I can get a breakdown because there will be more in there than just that, but that was one of the main events that was in there.
Okay, thank you. Tom, are you happy with that?
Yeah, I suppose that the obvious question there is, in the operational planning, that situation, I do understand the variances that can occur there, you know, demands as the scenario emerges. But that linkage back into the budgeting assumptions clearly has had a lag there to leave that into this stage. So is there something we need to do in terms, I'm not looking for an answer just now, but is there something we need to do there in terms of the methodology we use so that the budgets are actually being amended accordingly as the planning assumptions change in flight?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can understand where you're coming from, Tom, because it's an ongoing feature for future years as well, as to you start off with an assumption, but if the assumption changes, when do you update both the income and cost profiles?
And while the World Cycling Championships are a huge event, they're not as huge as something like COP26. And so that variance could be really significantly different, a different type of operation requiring mutual aid.
Okay. James.
Yeah, I mean, we'll take it away and review it, and we always do look for lessons learned. The one thing I would say about the World Cycling Championships is that it was a new thing to have it all together, and actually there was a lot of learning, I think, on the part of the organisers, and you know, a lot of things were late, and you know, we didn't have the levels of certainty that you would have with something that's been running for a long time, like European Football Championships or athletics and so on. So there'd be an element of that, but certainly we'll take it away and see if there's anything else that we can do to tighten up. But certainly that would be my reflection, that even going into May, June time, and getting really close to the event, there was still quite a lot of uncertainty, and I think it does just reflect that there was, it was the first time that it had been done, and that there were a lot of things that had to be done quite quickly in order to get us into a position. So I think that, to an extent, was a one-off, but I think the general point is correct, and we'll take that forward.
Okay, thanks, James. Alistair.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'd also add my own voice of congratulations from that £19 million plus projection to the place you've got to today. I recognise that it has been, a collective and at times probably felt like a Herculean effort to get there. But it's it's looking really good. So well done in relation to that. From listening to various discussions around this, I think one of the keys to success has been that connection between finance and operational policing, seeing that finance is an enabler to deliver operational policing. So that's one of the lessons that it's not a lesson, but it's one of the things I've recognised. So I'd like to congratulate people on that working together. But my question really is, there are a number of lessons here, and we've had reassurances that they will be captured, that they will be embedded into the organisation going forward. Do you have a formal debriefing process at year end to capture these things and to reflect on them, so that they're formally captured and fed into that approach going forward within Police Scotland?
Very good question, Alistair. Now Lynn, yes.
Sorry, James, I don't know where you want to come in first there.
It's okay. I mean, all I was going to say is that we obviously have the outturn report, and that goes through corporate finance and people boards, and we would normally take that into SLB as well, where there's an opportunity for discussion, reflection. It's not as formal as a having a debrief. That's something, I think, given kind of turbulent year that we've had. Is certainly a conversation that we can pick up. You know, we speak to DCC Connors and the other depths around what we might want to do. But I think your observations are right. I mean, it was the way in which finance and operational policing were able to work together through the course of the year that brought it back in, and it was a more acute issue than we've had certainly in the time that I've been here, just given the challenges with the settlement and the speed at which we had to react come the summer. So I think there's obvious lessons there, but we probably want to think about how we might document that, because over time people change. But we've seen a really kind of positive outcome over the last 6 months or so. So yeah, we'll take that on board. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, thanks, James. Lynn, anything you want to add to that?
No, I think James has covered it all. I was just going to say we do a sort of internal lessons learned exercise as part of the after the budget setting, and we're having discussions about how we can extend that wider, just similar to what James was saying there about documenting the approach. So that was all. Thanks.
Yeah. Thanks, Lynn. I'm delighted to see DCC Connors on screen. I mean, one of the things that I think is key to this is that, as colleagues have already mentioned, we started the year thinking we had everything balanced and had assurances this time last year that everything in the budget would be deliverable and there wouldn't be any problems. Over the coming months through to the summer, that became increasingly an issue, and it's good to see the grip now on police officer overtime under DCC Spears work there. But I think the point raised about lessons learned, bring together not just the financial aspects, but how lessons have been learned from the senior leadership board right down into the divisions is quite key. So DCC Connors, is there anything you'd like to comment on how the lessons learned are cascaded and picked up and cascaded from an operational perspective?
Yeah, I think it is a really valid point. I think because of the nature of the kind of critical implementation of some of the structures that need to be done, I think there is benefit in us looking back at each of the different areas that put in systems, how that worked and how that cascaded down, and then being able to look at it across the piece. Because we obviously had the overtime, but we managed events differently. There was a whole load of different aspects. So I think that is something that we will need to collectively look at and then have an overview of all of that. And as you say, how did that actually reach down into the organisation so it made a difference? And understanding that is key as well.
Yes, I think we'd all, I think from you and your colleagues' perspective, having a bit of a post-mortem on it, so that everybody can learn. Hopefully this will never arise in the future, but I think it's useful to have it on record that it's been thought about. Yeah. Okay, thank you. Is there anything you'd like to add to this particular paper, looking at it with from period 10 with 2.5 weeks to go?
I think it's probably been covered. The focus remains on getting the work done to make sure we come in where we need to. There's no loss of grip, but also we're kind of projecting forward a bit, like you've just said about the lessons learned, to make sure as we go into next year, we're continuing that focus and that grip as well. But it has been a very tough job, but credit to everybody that's been involved to get us to where we have been.
Thank you. Yes, and I think in our minutes we'll certainly record the huge challenge we faced in the summer and the immense amount of work bringing together financial and operational teams right across the organisation to actually make sure we're in the position we're currently in, with just a very short window to go before the end of March. Thank you. Right, we're asked to really discuss the contents of the report and the appendix. I think we've done that. Anybody got anything else they want to raise before we move on? Okay, thank you. So moving on to the next item on the agenda is 4.1, the estates transformation. And for this, we welcome Yvonne Johnson and Davina Faraday. Yes.
Good morning, Chair.
You've just appeared magically on screen. Thank you. Welcome to you both.
Thank you.
Again, you can take it that we've studied the papers, but is there anything you'd like to particularly draw our attention to?
Thank you, Chair. So I'm going to introduce the paper sort of on behalf of the Strategy and Innovation, their Research and Insights team, who have conducted a really extensive and robust national and local consultation process on behalf of Estates Transformation, but also on behalf of the operation and the organisation as well. And Davina will come in and add anything that she would like to add in more detail. So please, thank you, Chair. So Police Scotland has publicly acknowledged the plans to accelerate properties identified for closure. And this has been reported in the media and included in evidence submissions at Scottish Parliament's Criminal Justice Committee, Scottish Police Authority board meetings and in partner letters. The Research and Insight Service, in collaboration with Communications and Estates colleagues, are taking consideration of the sensitivities internally and externally around each building. We must continue to be open and transparent in our approach, communicating and engaging appropriately with purpose, and continually to manage expectations and respond to concerns which may arise because of this period of change. For a meaningful and constructive dialogue, the narrative has so far focused on outcomes and needs over buildings and efficiencies. While the estate can be an enabler, if in the right locations and in good condition, it does not equate to service delivery. Communications and messaging has also been focused on Police Scotland's budgetary challenges and has been clear on what our proposals are, and that the service will be making tough choices and decisions informed by feedback and consultation with the public. We've made a commitment to keep communities and our stakeholders updated and informed as this engagement and indeed with the wider transformation programme develops. So the Research and Insight Service, in collaboration with colleagues from other corporate functions and with local policing divisions, have designed, managed and coordinated the quality control of activities, namely under headings of a national conversation about the future of our estate, local community impact assessment, a consultation for each individual building, weekly reviews and analysis of data, and analysis, synthesis and reporting. A detailed report is attached to Appendix A to the paper, and that outlines the emerging themes from the engagement. This is a continually evolving picture, and the team will continue to monitor responses as we progress, working with colleagues in corporate comms to ensure appropriate awareness in all areas. And I would say as well that corporate comms have also provided extensive support around the engagement consultation and to divisional commanders and to estates as well. At the time of writing, there were 4 live consultations in the West, 2 in the East and none in the North region. 18 consultations recently closed, 10 in the West, 1 in the East and 7 in the North. And further consultations are due to go live on the Engagement Hub over the coming weeks. And I would just also point out that the engagement activities are designed to be inclusive and fully accessible and aim to provide balanced information and answers to frequently asked questions for respondents to review before providing the responses. And a digital-first approach is being taken to maximise accessibility on the Engagement Hub with many assistive technologies to respond to user needs. The team will continue to update members as the programme of engagement progresses over the coming weeks and months to ensure full awareness and oversight of activities underway, as well as what we're learning from public and stakeholder feedback through their involvement. Thank you, Chair, and I'll hand over to Davina to provide some more detail on the process. Thank you.
Thanks, Yvonne. Welcome, Davina. Over to you.
Thanks both. I think Yvonne's pretty much provided a really good comprehensive summary of the overall approach. So I lead our in-house professional research and engagement team, and as Yvonne said, we've been working collaboratively with corporate comms, estate colleagues and local policing just to understand local needs for designing bespoke local approaches to the engagement. So we know this isn't a one-size-fits-all approach. Our needs will be different. depending on the local communities, the visibility of the building itself and the local use of the building. So we've taken all of those considerations into account with local policing colleagues to design an appropriate approach. So just to add to Yvonne's overview, the scale and scope of the engagement at a local level has been dependent on that local risk assessment model. So some engagements have been carried out over a 4 to 6 weeks period, some longer, over 8 weeks. And the more kind of complex cases, we've carried out a full 12-week consultation for those as well. So just in case there were any questions around that in terms of why did the local consultations look slightly different, the national conversation is going to be live and continuous until we need it to be. So that will continue to run in parallel with the local consultation. So to date, since the national consultation went live mid-December, we've completed 19 local consultations. And so my team are providing in-depth reports on each of the local consultations with a full demographic breakdown as well. We've had some responses from colleagues. So we did provide a dedicated space within the engagement platform for colleagues to share their views as well, but purely from a service delivery point of view. And we're breaking down the results by stakeholder groups as well. So we've had quite a few community groups respond to the local consultations as well. So in addition to the high level report, which is very high level, which we've appended to the paper circulated today, we've got in-depth local consultation reports that will be shared with the states and local policing colleagues to inform the decision-making process. But for complete openness and transparency, those individual site reports will be publicised on our engagement hub as well, so that we're ensuring that continued engagement and follow-up with communities and stakeholders on how their feedback has informed decisions. I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you very much. A couple from me before opening it up to the other committee members. There are a number of respondents from different locations. It's probably no great surprise. You quite anticipate there'd be quite a range, but particularly the number who disagreed with the proposed disposal. Could you say? I'm not sure if it's you to be able to answer this or whether it's actually the operational colleagues. How do we feed back to the people who said we don't want to close a particular location? How it's then we've listened and this is what we're going to do. I mean, it may well be, and I'm making this up obviously, we're closing X, but we're putting in Y in its place. How does it all get communicated to people is really my question.
Yeah, I can quickly answer that and bring in operational colleagues. So the way we've designed the consultation is to be qualitative and open-ended as well as quantitative. So we've correlated levels of agreement and disagreement with reasons behind that, just so exploring why people might agree or disagree with the proposals, but also kind of just teasing out what their local concerns and questions are to help manage any kind of misconceptions about the service and the loss of the building. So where we are seeing levels of disagreement is in relation to people feeling that the service might be lost as a result of losing the building. And we know that police visit buildings are a driver of public confidence because the community feel that's providing police accessibility and visibility. So I think it's managing whatever the outcomes and the decisions are, it's managing those expectations and addressing those concerns, but just being super clear in terms of this is the rationale, this is why we asked you about the proposals, and these are the decisions that we're making as a result of your feedback as well. So I think the qualitative rich insights is helping us to dispel some myths about the local police service in some areas as well. So just to try and provide that more kind of rounded, comprehensive feedback. But very much that will be done with the local commanders to provide that operational perspective with their communities.
Right, so it'll be at the local level that it will be fed back. Yvonne, is that something you want to comment on as a follow-on to that?
Yes, Thank you, and absolutely, as Davina says, that that local engagement between divisional commanders and their teams, and whether it's local stakeholders like chief executives, councillors, community groups, or indeed members of the public, that's happening at a local level. A good example of that is Greenock, which was probably one of the ones, if not the one with the largest feedback on it. And I think what we did, or what corporate comms had pulled together when the communications went out about the proposed closures, was that we talked about the buildings that we proposed to close in the future, but we didn't necessarily talk about what the alternative arrangements would be going forward. We didn't talk about the destination sites, for example, and the reason for that was in some instances that might have been commercially sensitive, because we were in discussion with partners about a co-location, for example, or another aspect of that would have been that we didn't want to disclose destination sites prior to staff consultations where those detailed conversations would be had. So for Greenock, absolutely, we would not be leaving Greenock Police Station unless we had alternative accommodation arrangements, both for local policing and for CJSD custody and productions. And those are conversations that we are continuing to have locally with the divisional commanders and their teams on that. We've also been supporting Gordon McCready at local scrutiny boards, etc. as well. Just explaining that whole situation. So it's much easier when those conversations are had at a local level, and you can talk about that there are alternative arrangements in train, that we are looking at arrangements for the future that maybe haven't been disclosed when we went out and did the original comms. So hopefully that explains a little bit about it.
Thanks, Yvonne. I think clearly there's lessons learned about when to go out for consultation, and being able to at least say we're not just shutting down a service, we're actually just moving it to something else. But lessons learned with that. DCC Connors, you've got your hand up. Presumably this is on this point.
Yeah, I think Yvonne's very ably covered it, but it is exactly that. If we're going for disposal or changing of a building, what then is the offer? Sometimes that's really difficult, but that's key. But also the consultation often says that the people know that there aren't people in the buildings, but it's just the sign on it that makes them feel safe. So again, it's how do we make sure we have that visibility in the area as we go through. But it's exactly as Yvonne said, we need to make sure we've got clear messages for the divisional commanders so they can do that kind of feed in as well. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you. It's obvious from the comments and the analysis that the physical presence of a building with a police sign on it, it promotes confidence in the public, even though they may never use it and the building's not actually accessible to the public. But we need to get the message told in a roundabout in a well understood way. Next person, Tom.
Thanks very much. So again, involvement of local staff in the conversation, you've explained that, and that's commendable. But there's a formal engagement of the workforce through the staff associations and unions in line with their commitment to fair work. Could you give us some understanding of how that formal involvement of the workforce is actually established?
Okay. Yvonne.
Thank you. Yes, that is in the main being led by P&D in conjunction with the staff associations and unions. In terms of our timelines, there's a section of our timelines that is dedicated to staff consultations and to JNCC meetings as well. And P&D are leading on that. So, for example, we can't close a building or declare a building surplus unless those consultations have been had with staff members. Probably don't want to necessarily go into detail of particular sites, but that's one part of it. The other part of it as well is that when we bring forward a paper to declare building surplus to operational requirements, we share those papers with staff associations and with trade unions. I know the one that we're bringing forward this afternoon, we were in debate over whether a site would go on or not, so it kind of held up the submission of the paper, and we probably didn't give as much time to staff associations and unions to have a look at that as we would have liked to, but we'll certainly be able to do that going forward. The other thing is that we were very conscious of needing to have full conversations with the staff associations and unions, and had organised a meeting to talk them through everything in detail in relation to the programme, and that was chaired by ACC Johnson and James. The unions were in attendance, but unfortunately there was no representation came to the meeting from the Federation. But we are available at all times to have conversations with the Federation and with the unions, and as I say, full consultation with staff members will be led by P&D. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Tom, do you want to come back on that?
If you don't mind. Thanks, Yvonne. I understand the sensitivities involved in that. There is a sense of deeper involvement than simply about terms and conditions of members as you would get through the P&D. The conversation is about the operational considerations around things like, as you said, custody and productions and all these other things. And the risk is the fact that there's no one at that meeting is itself a flag to myself on the board as well. So I would ask that be taken into consideration by DCC Connors and maybe that engagement given it is all about this commitment to fair work and the principles of that. So thank you.
Thanks, Tom. Alistair. Oh, sorry. Jane Connors, do you want to say anything on that particular point?
Yeah, it is a valid point, and I've got a meeting actually with P&D to bring me up to speed on the processes, because I'm not as familiar with it. And speaking to Steve Johnson as well, that's something we would like to do is do a bit more of a combination. And I think there are absolutely consultation, but some buildings have one member of office or staff in it. Some buildings have lots. So again, it's that ability to progress through the different stages commensurate to what we're actually dealing with as well. But to reassure you, Tom, the meetings with myself and Steve Johnson, who's leading on this, are now taking place, so I can understand it a bit better.
Right. Okay, thank you. Alistair. Oh, sorry, you're on mute. Oh.
Yeah, I saw Yvonne had her hand
Yeah.
up. I don't know if she'd finished responding to Tom's question.
Yvonne, thank you. Yvonne.
Yeah, thank you, Alistair. Just very quickly, just to say as well that we also plan to share with the unions and with staff associations the plans for the future sites. We're not at that stage yet. We're still in the planning process with workshops and requirements gathering. But for a number of the sites that's coming to conclusion. So we will absolutely sit down with staff associations and the Federation to talk through those plans and make sure that we're taking cognizance of all the right considerations for officers and staff, as well as with ED&I, who we work hand in hand with. Thank you.
Thanks, Yvonne. So reverting to you, Alistair.
Thanks very much, Chair. I've got two questions which I think are related. The first one is around paragraph 2.2, where it says that what you're doing is you're not working to do things for people. What you want to do is you want to work with people to meet their needs, which is quite a challenge. So I'm just wondering how you actually work with people to understand what their needs are and then to design services around that, and how this process is helping with that. And sort of related to this is low numbers in terms of the people that have responded. So if you really want to understand the needs of people, and you need to engage with them, which is I know a real challenge, but low numbers. And one of the things that slightly worries me is the consultation closes, and then the time to decision in some cases looks rather short. So one of the big criticisms always of consultations is you've already made up your mind. This is a tick box exercise, and it's not really, my opinion, my feedback is not really going to influence the decision because it's already made. So I'm just wondering, how you connect those things together, how you're working with people to meet their needs, and how you're meaningfully using that feedback, to engage people going forward and increase the number of people that are groups that may potentially engage effectively in the future. Hope that all makes sense.
Yeah, very good questions. Who wishes to answer first, Yvonne or Davina?
I'll let Davina answer that to start off with. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Davina.
Yeah, just to respond to those methodological questions that you had. So we've made the consultation open and as inclusive as possible. So it is self-selection. So instead of going out on the street and asking people, we just want to make sure, like we do with our local police public confidence surveys, that anybody at any time can provide their feedback. And corporate comms have developed comprehensive communication plans and templates to use at a national level to raise awareness of the consultation as much as possible. But then also there's communication templates at a local level as well to share with all stakeholder groups, community groups, and just to raise awareness of the local consultations as much as possible. In addition to that, in terms of understanding people's needs, is also based on conversations with the local policing teams as well and stakeholder groups to understand local needs in relation to that particular building and perceptions and use, particularly is the building used as a safe space for local communities. That is one of our questions in our engagement. We share, so my team constantly review all the data coming in by demographic status and postcodes of the participants responding to the engagement, so we can see where any underrepresented groups might be to try and enhance communications if we think that that's appropriate and relevant to do. And including questions that are open-ended to understand what are your concerns, how do you currently use the building, or what does this building mean to you in your local community, etc. So it's not asking a lot of closed questions. But my team do constantly review the data coming in and emerging themes, and we have weekly meetings with corporate comms and estate colleagues as well, and local policing teams with the divisional commanders and the SPOCs to share any emerging themes that are coming through. So when the consultation does close, the key themes and findings shouldn't be a surprise, because we've been sharing the feedback in a continual way to all the key people involved in the decision-making process.
Okay. Thanks, Davina. Yvonne, anything you would like to add to that?
Yeah, thank you. Just in relation to Alistair's question about the time frame between the consultation closing and bringing some of the properties forward to be declared surplus, the reason why that's been short in the first particular instance of the first tranche is that the three buildings that are being brought forward were already vacant. They have been for a number of years. The officers who are based at those stations are already deploying out of other stations in close proximity and providing the service to those local communities from there. Meanwhile, we have 3 empty buildings sitting in those communities, deteriorating and costing public money to keep them maintained and updated, and we don't think that represents best value. The services are still being provided to those communities, and the divisional commanders responsible are convinced that those properties are no longer required and won't be in the future. So hence the reason why that's been short, because the buildings are already vacant and officers are already deploying from elsewhere. Hopefully that helps a bit. Alistair, thanks.
Okay, thanks. Alistair?
Yeah, no, I understand fully the approach you're taking, and also the rationale for that short time frame there. And I know we're talking about this in the context of buildings, and I commend the approach. It's just, in my experience, it is a big challenge to work with communities to design services that meet their needs. It's complex, it's time consuming, so I understand in the context of where we are, but actually for me the answer lies wider than this, and it's the big piece of work that DCC Connors is leading this year, and it's that overall design, redesign of policing services across Scotland and in buildings and other things help to enable that, so but what you've got to do, you've got to keep the service running as is while you transition. So I just wanted to draw out some of these very complex things, but as I say, I do commend the approach that has been taken.
Yeah, thanks. DCC Connors.
Yeah, thank you. And it's just to follow up again, all the hard work that's done. There's some really difficult decisions around the Police Scotland estate, as everybody knows, the state of some of our buildings, but being able to work with our communities for any alternative meets their needs as well, as Alistair has said, is really, really important. And that's the bit we're trying to do. It is, some of it does feel like, as you say, we're doing consultation on a building that is in such disrepair that actually it's not viable for us. But the impact of that and understanding for the communities of what's the alternative, what are they going to see, so they get that reassurance, for us is really key. And we'll continue to work with that with the engagement teams and the estates teams.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Jane.
Yeah.
Just a couple of things from me. When I looked at, it's the slide that says National Conversation Stroke Summary, where it's got agree, neither agree nor disagree, and disagree. There's quite a lot in the disagreement category across each of these, and I do wonder to what can be done to actually just diffuse the disagreement categories, if that's in any way possible. People would say that to some extent you can never over communicate, but I think in this case actually greater focus on communicating and explaining both the overall perspective across Police Scotland, but also in a local area for the local commanders and divisions to actually find a way of continually communicating with the public, as well as the officers and the unions and so on. I don't think you can ever underestimate the amount of time required, and the fact it's a continual process to try and actually keep people informed. And if they're informed and it's all explained properly, then hopefully that will help them to have a better understanding of why things are moving in the direction we're trying to move. Yvonne, you've got your hand up.
Thank you, Chair, and completely agree. And I think a lot of that sort of high volume in some instances of disagreement again comes down to the fact that we haven't provided the rest of the story. We've said that we're proposing to close these buildings, but we haven't said what the alternative is for the future. And I think that's where it's absolutely key that divisional commanders are having those engagements locally with stakeholders and with community groups, and explaining what the alternative options are, or explaining that we're looking at options and there will be an alternative going forward in the future, and there'll be no detriment to the service delivery that they receive until we we have alternatives in place, and that level of service is continuous. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, I think that's very much the message that we're all coming up with. I don't underestimate the challenge, but I think it's key to getting the dial turned away from negative to neutral to positive. and supportive. Okay, and I think that probably concludes our discussion on this item. We've certainly noted and have a better understanding of what you've achieved to date and the direction going forward. So I think that brings us to the end of item 4.1 and the
Thank
end
you,
of our
Chair.
public session. So can we pause for a short